In America, we have no kings. That's one of the rallying cries for Saturday's nationwide protests against President Trump. More than 3,000 No Kings protests are planned across the country. Millions are preparing to take to the streets in what's expected to be the largest No Kings protest to date, and what The Nation magazine says could become the biggest day of protest in U.S. history. One of the largest No Kings protests will be in St. Paul, Minneapolis, just miles from where federal immigration agents fatally shot Renee Good and Alex Preti to death in January. Performers and speakers in St. Paul will include Senator Bernie Sanders, Bruce Springsteen, Jane Fonda, and Joan Baez. On Thursday, Edwin Torres de Santiago of the Immigrant Defense Network spoke about the Minnesota protests.
Right now, across Minnesota and across this country, immigrant families are living in fear that something as simple as going to work or taking their children to school could separate them from their loved ones. That is the reality. A mother texting her child just to say, "I made it." A father calling in the middle of the day to just say, "I'm okay." I know this because it's exactly what both of my parents do every single day. For 25 years, I lived without documentation, and my parents still do. And let's be clear about what is happening. You don't send mask agents into neighborhoods, into airports, into communities to keep people safe. You send them to keep people terrified. And that fear is not accidental. It is part of our larger escalation, and we're already seeing the consequences. We've seen the consequences. Keith Porter Jr., Renee Good, Alex Preti, Dr. Linda Davis, Ruben Ray Martinez, and dozens of others that have been killed by this administration's escalation. And let's not forget the 40 deaths inside detention centers since this administration has taken office. Silence and inactions are not an option anymore.
Supporters of the No Kings protests include the AFT, that's the American Federation of Teachers. This is the group's president, Randy Weingarten.
$1 billion a day for this war, and yet we couldn't find the money for the Obamacare tax credits. Then now we're seeing a huge increase in premium payments that people have had to pay. We couldn't find the money for Medicaid that is closing rural hospitals all over America. We couldn't find the money for SNAP when people were having parties at Mar-a-Lago. The people are saying we need to find a way to support ourselves. We don't want a war that's costing billions of dollars. We don't want a war that is increasing the cost of gas. We don't want a debate that is actually making the lines of TSA, like the line I had this morning, hours long. People in America are saying you have been elected to help us and our families have a better life, not to help the billionaires, not to create robots as teachers, not to just create ways that you and your family get rich, Donald Trump. And that's why more and more people see him as a king.
The unprovoked U.S. and Israeli war on Iran will also be a focus of Saturday's No Kings protest. This is Naveed Shah of the group Common Defense.
This illegal war with Iran is built on the same lies as the one with Iraq 20 years ago. I know because I lived it as an Army veteran who served in Iraq. Me and my friends know that our leaders lied to us into a war with no strategy and no endgame. I swore an oath to this Constitution, not to a king, not to a politician, and I will not stay silent while we march down that same road into another forever war.
Those speakers all took part in an online No Kings press conference on Thursday because they were all over the country. We're joined right now by Leah Greenberg, co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible, which is part of the No Kings Coalition helping to organize Saturday's protests. Leah, can you start off by talking about the scope of these protests? You're talking about the possibility, the nation says, of the largest protests in U.S. history, with 3,000 protests taking place across the country. Explain how it's being organized.
Well, I'm proud to say that as of this morning, that number is up to 3,200, including every congressional district in the country and 6 of 7 continents around the world. What we're fundamentally doing with this is we're issuing a call to regular people all over the country. In some places, this is anchored by, in a city, it's anchored by a coalition with, indivisible groups and labor, your local labor council, human rights organizations, everybody's collectively throwing in together. In some small towns across the country, it's, one woman who raised her hand and said, I can't take it anymore. I got to get my community together. But what we're seeing is that the scope and the breadth of what is happening across this country is enormous. People are coming out in every state, in every county collectively and saying, enough. We are going to stand against illegal wars abroad. We are going to stand against secret police at home. We don't have kings in this country.
I understand that in Spain, in Barcelona, it's actually called No Tyrants Day because they have a king.
We've heard a couple versions of that. In Hawaii, obviously, there's cultural sensitivities around, the history of the monarchy in Hawaii. What we want people to take a stand against fundamentally is imperious, unaccountable governance that substitutes the judgment of one man and his cronies and his corrupt billionaires for the actual will of the people, because that is what we are seeing right now.
And then talk about why the No Kings national flagship rally is in St. Paul, Minnesota, with Bruce Springsteen, I guess you could say, headlining, with Jane Fonda there, with Joan Baez there, and other political figures, of course, across Minnesota.
Well, we think the story of Minnesota is incredibly important for everyone in America to hear and to understand, because fundamentally what we saw there was the occupation of an American city, the unleashing of a reign of terror and racial profiling that was pushed back by organized, nonviolent, disciplined people power. You had immigrant rights organizers, labor, faith leaders, regular people, soccer moms and retirees collectively organizing to say, no, you're not going to take our neighbors. You are not going to impose this on our city. We're all in this together. And they have successfully organized an extraordinary resistance that everyone in America should understand and should learn the lessons from, because fundamentally we are not going to get out of any of this mess without building the collective people power all across this country that pushes back on authoritarianism, that pushes back on secret police like ICE, and that demands that we look up to and protect, or that we look to and protect our neighbors.
So your data shows 2/3 of the RSVPs are coming from outside of major urban centers, nearly, 40% up from the first No Kings action. If you can talk about the significance of this and your message to former Trump voters. We see MAGA splintering with Joe Rogan and others seriously questioning what they thought was the non-interventionist stance of President Trump, challenging running on a platform of no more forever wars.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're seeing with this march and all of our data suggests the same when we look at who is organizing new indivisible groups or new activist collectives around the country, is that the resistance to Trump and to MAGA is reaching farther and deeper and more significantly into red and rural areas than it ever has in the past, in the first Trump term or ever before. And I think that's a factor that's being driven by a number of things. People, whoever they are, across political lines, do not like it when you send masked police into their neighborhoods and take their neighbors. That is something that the vast majority of us can agree on, fight on, pushing back against. People do not want a catastrophic war that is killing people, thousands of innocent folks abroad, that is driving up costs at home. They do not want their healthcare funds going to bombs that are being dropped on an Iranian girls' school. They want to see, a government that is accountable to them. And what we're seeing with this moment is that this is a real opportunity to reach out to people who thought, I'm going to roll the dice with another Trump term. Maybe they lower the cost of living. Maybe they lower the cost of gas and eggs. He's certainly not going to get us into any wars. Those folks, those are people who we want to pull in right now while they are questioning what the heck the bill of goods they were sold, and say, come on over to our side.
Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, all showing up with double-digit events. What do you think this portends for the midterms?
Well, look, I think we've seen this over and over again with the off-year elections, with the special elections. From Florida to Virginia, what we are seeing is that if you're a Republican, this is not a year in which you should assume your safest seat and your seat is safe. And it doesn't matter whether it was safe a couple of years ago. Fundamentally, there is an extraordinary amount of backlash brewing in this country everywhere. And you should be worried about whether you are being accountable to your constituents right now, because they are angry. And I can guarantee you that is the case whether you represent a ruby red area or a deep blue area.
Leah Greenberg, I want to thank you for being with us. I know you have to get onto a plane. Co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible, the grassroots movement, part of the No Kings Coalition, helping to organize Saturday's protests. And Democracy Now! Will be covering these protests, and you can tune in on Monday for the voices from the streets. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.